The midday sun beat down mercilessly on the cracked asphalt of Route 68, a thick, dusty heat that clung to the skin like a damp sheet. On that stretch between Dust Creek and Red Rock, time seemed to have stopped. Barbed wire fences, scattered Joshua trees, and an ancient silence known only to the arid plains defined the landscape. It was there, between nowhere and next to nowhere, that a silver rental car with out-of-state plates slowed to a stop in front of a gas station forgotten by maps. Behind the wheel was Eleanor Ellie Vance, 52, a general in the United States Army. Her salt and pepper hair was pulled back in a low bun beneath a faded olive-green baseball cap, drawing little attention. She wore worn jeans, dark sneakers, and a light jacket that smelled of the road. Nothing in her appearance suggested who she really was, and that was intentional. She turned off the ignition and waited a few seconds before getting out. The gas station seemed half asleep, a rusted gas pump, a small diner with peeling paint, and 3 men sitting in the shade of a pickup truck, chuckling at something playing low on the radio. Ellie noticed them from the corner of her eye, but didn't look directly. She retrieved a small, heavy gray device with a retracted antenna from her inner pocket, a secure phone for restricted use. She raised the antenna, pressed a button, and waited for the signal to stabilize. Nothing. Just 2 bars. She walked away from the car, slowly making her way toward the side of the diner, searching for better reception. Doris Miller, 57, the gas station manager, watched her through the window. Her dyed blonde hair was nearly white, and her brow was permanently furrowed as if the whole world owed her something. The unknown black woman outside, alone, speaking into a strange device, triggered old alarms in her narrow mind. Ellie leaned against the sun-baked wall, phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was low and precise. General Eleanor Vance, code Echo Zulu 47, initiating dispatch with the Institutional Security Council. On the other end, a voice responded, "Sensitive details, classified instructions." She listened closely, her eyes drifting slowly across the surroundings, scanning as she had learned to do over years of operations. The men by the pickup truck had stopped laughing. Their radio was off now. They were watching her with thinly veiled curiosity. Doris Miller, still behind the counter, didn't see a high-ranking officer. She saw a problem, a risk, an unwelcome presence that didn't fit the landscape. She picked up the dusty landline and dialed slowly. "Sheriff's Department, this is Dot at the Sunbeam Gas. There's a strange woman outside, talking to herself. Looks like she might be on something. Better send someone over." Outside, Ellie continued her conversation with DC. The words were few, but each carried weight. The sky was cloudless, the ground scorched, and already someone had decided she didn't belong. Dot hadn't taken her eyes off the woman. She had spent over 20 years behind that counter and had learned to distrust anything unfamiliar, especially the unfamiliar that stayed quiet. She didn't like people who spoke softly, who arrived without explanation, who didn't smile to mask their presence. Dot had been born and raised in that dry stretch of Nevada, where everyone knew everyone, and where any stranger was by default a threat. She watched Ellie with narrowed eyes, as if trying to solve an offensive riddle. There was no military bearing, no uniform, no insignia, just a black woman with a steady expression, speaking into a strange device as if issuing orders. It was unsettling, frightening, even if she'd never admit it. In the back of the store, the ceiling fan turned lazily, as exhausted as the afternoon itself. Dot pressed her lips into a tight line, picked up the grimy landline again, and dialed once more. The voice on the other end was familiar. "Sheriff's Department? Dot here from the Sunbeam Gas. Got a woman out here, all alone by the pump, talking to herself on some weird cell phone. Doesn't look like she's from around here. Gives off a strange vibe. Better come take a look. Might be on something." She hung up before they could ask more questions, wiped her hands on her apron, and returned to the window. Her small eyes gleamed with bitter satisfaction. Outside, Ellie moved calmly, still on the call. She was receiving a new update from the ISC, something encrypted that required silence and precision. She brought the device closer to her ear and walked toward the hood of the car to try to stabilize the signal. Her face remained serene, but there was tension in her temples. The communication required absolute accuracy. Broken phrases, codes, asset locations, names that only a dozen people in the country had clearance to hear. Ellie knew she was being watched. Her instincts, sharpened over decades, told her so, but she didn't react. She stayed focused on what mattered, on what was coming from D.C. The three men by the truck were whispering now. One, with a backward baseball cap and yellowed teeth, pointed discreetly at her. Another, older, crossed his arms, waiting for something to happen. Inside the suffocating store, Dot kept watching. In her world, nothing about that woman made sense. Too much composure, too much silence, too much self-assurance. Everything about her felt like a provocation. And it was better, Dot thought, for the police to handle it before it became a problem. Ellie, outside, made a slight adjustment to the phone's antenna. The signal improved. The transmission continued. And far away in Washington, D.C., someone was already listening intently. The strident roar of an approaching engine shattered the gas station's silence with violent force. Two patrol cars arrived almost simultaneously, their tires kicking up dust and gravel. The heat from the engine still radiated as two deputies stepped out quickly. One of them, broad-chested with a sun-reddened face, already had his hand near his weapon. This was Sergeant Miller, 38, known in Dust Creek for acting before thinking. Beside him stood a younger, leaner deputy with anxious eyes and a hurried step, Deputy Jones, 24, still desperate to prove he deserved the uniform he wore. They didn't ask who she was. They didn't introduce themselves. They arrived certain they were right and that they were there to handle something. "Hands in the air," Miller barked, not waiting for a response. "License and registration, now! What are you doing here?" Ellie didn't move suddenly. She turned slowly, palms open and visible. Her voice was firm, unhurried, carrying the weight of someone who had never needed to justify herself. "I am General Eleanor Vance, United States Army. I am on official mission." The silence that followed lasted less than 2 seconds, broken by Miller's dry laugh. "A general? Here? With that baseball cap and that little radio?" He stepped closer, contempt written all over his face. Jones took Ellie's documents she extended, barely glanced at them, then tossed them onto the hood with a dismissive flick. "These are fake," he muttered, though the decision had clearly been made before he even read them. By the pickup truck, 2 of the local men chuckled quietly. A third had already raised his phone and was filming, silently. Dot remained at her window, arms crossed, satisfied. Ellie tried again, her tone unchanged. "Those documents are official. I am in direct contact with the Institutional Security Council." "Shut your mouth!" Miller snapped. "We've had enough of your kind of talk." He grabbed her arm with unnecessary force. Jones stepped in and, with a sharp movement, slapped the handcuffs on her, metal biting hard into bone. Ellie's phone hit the ground, screen still lit. The transmission hadn't stopped. In a gray room at the ISC in Washington, D.C., Lieutenant Hayes stared at the monitor. The audio had become a chaotic mix of raised voices, muffled sounds, and interference. He removed his headphones and looked at his superior. "This isn't right. There are sounds of restraint." Someone shouted. "Rewind the audio. Boost it. Find out where she is," ordered Colonel Davies, stepping forward, jaw tight. Back at the gas station, Ellie was slammed against the side of her car. The metallic clang echoed like a sharp slap. She didn't cry out, not even a groan, but her eyes, fixed on the ground, caught the reflection of her own face in the dirty metal. It was as if she had vanished, right there in front of everyone. A small crowd had begun to gather. Some laughed, others filmed. No one spoke. No one did anything. In the third basement of the Institutional Security Council building in D.C., the lights were always cold and the air conditioning relentless. Between frosted glass panels and monitors that never blinked idly, Lieutenant Hayes, an operations technician, kept his eyes locked on secure channel Echo Zulu 47, a restricted-use line with maximum clearance. General Eleanor Vance's transmission had begun clearly, protocol-driven as always. But now the signal was failing. Metallic interference, clipped phrases, a muffled shout, mechanical static. Hayes frowned. He pulled off his headset and rewound the recording. He played the segment 3 times. The static persisted, but beneath it, something else. A command, abruptly cut off. Before he could trigger protocol escalation, the room's door burst open. Colonel Davies, head of the Immediate Response Division, entered without knocking, already holding her own tablet, an alert flashing across the screen. "Status of line Echo Zulu 47, she asked without preamble. Hayes rotated his monitor toward her. "General Vance is active, but the signal degraded sharply. External interference, possible physical disruption. Audio cut mid-transmission. Location: last triangulation points to a rural area near Red Rock, Nevada, a gas station, according to satellite imaging." Davies didn't hesitate. "Red alert. Contact Northern Command. I want boots en route now. Notify Nevada State Police. A federal authority is being unlawfully detained. No name, no context. Just this: release the woman immediately." Hayes was already typing. Within seconds, a direct line connected to the Reno command base. On the other end, a duty captain asked for clarification. Davies didn't give him any. "There's no time for context. A U.S. Army general is in handcuffs at a roadside gas station. She is on active mission, and the entire country will know in hours, if not minutes." The map on the screen zoomed in, centering on the grainy image of sunbeam gas. A blinking red marker pulsed like a warning heartbeat. "If this video leaks," Hayes murmured. "It will leak," Davies said, her voice tight but steady. "And when it does, we'll either be on the right side of history or burying careers." Phones in the room began to ring in sequence. Protocol was in motion. Activation codes, aerial imaging, clearance for tactical deployment. And all because, miles away, a woman who had carried the weight of 30 years of national service had been silenced by prejudice. Now, from D.C. to the Nevada desert, it wasn't just about her. It was about what would come next. The heat now seemed to rise from the ground itself. The concrete behind Ellie's back burned through her thin shirt. The metal cuffs had already torn her wrists, blood trickling down in thin, dark lines to her palms. And still she sat motionless, not out of pride, but because she had learned long ago that the silence of a black woman could weigh more than 1,000 words when timed precisely. She was seated against the side wall of the gas station, in full view of everyone. Sergeant Miller paced in the shade, sweating heavily. Jones hovered close, avoiding eye contact with the detainee, his face flushed, his fingers twitching. No one seemed to know exactly what they were waiting for, until Miller's radio crackled to life. "Unit 3, confirmed detention of a subject approximately 50 years of age." Jones fumbled to respond, pressing the button with shaky fingers. "Affirmative." A pause. Then, "Attention! Subject identified as a federal officer on active mission. Direct order from the White House, release her immediately and await military backup. I repeat, release her now." The world froze for 2 seconds. Miller paled, eyes wide, unable to process. Jones cursed under his breath and stumbled toward the keyring hanging from the side of the patrol car. His hands trembled so badly he dropped the keys twice before managing to unlock the cuffs. Ellie said nothing, not a word, not even a glance of anger. She simply looked at them. With a calm so unnerving, both men instinctively looked away. As her wrists were freed, she flexed her fingers slowly. The skin was broken, but she didn't flinch, didn't rub it, didn't complain. She just stood, rising with an unsettling composure. Dot, watching from behind the glass, vanished into the back of the store, as if she'd felt a shift in gravity. Then came the roar of engines. 3 matte black SUVs with military plates and tinted windows rounded the road's curve in coordinated formation. No sirens, no yelling. Authority arrived in silence, in the weight of footsteps. Colonel Marcus Thorne, 50, sharp blue eyes and a precise gait, was the first to exit. He was flanked by 2 armed officers and 4 soldiers in full active-duty gear. Seeing Ellie, he nodded respectfully, then turned to face Miller. "You assaulted a general of the Republic." Miller opened his mouth but produced no words. Jones stammered, attempting to intervene. We didn't know who she was." Thorne didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You had her ID in your hands. You saw her face. You heard her name. You didn't act from ignorance. You acted from disbelief." The silence that followed was complete. Even those filming stopped, sensing that what they were witnessing was no longer content for clicks. It was history unraveling. Thorne turned to Ellie, his tone respectful. "General Vance, do you wish to be examined by a military physician, or shall we proceed with transport?" "We proceed," Ellie replied, her first words since the cuffs had come off. 2 soldiers accompanied her to the center SUV, opening the door with care. She entered without a backward glance. Thorne remained, addressing the deputies. "You are both under immediate investigation. No further movement without command approval. No external contact. Any deviation will be considered obstruction of justice." Jones nodded, swallowing hard. Miller said nothing, just stood there, drenched in sweat. The SUV doors shut with precise finality. The engines fired in sync, and with a soft swirl of dust, the convoy pulled away from Sunbeam Gas. Inside the vehicle, Ellie looked briefly in the rearview mirror. The gas station shrank, then vanished behind the curve. Only then did she exhale, quietly, as if she had been holding her breath for hours. The inversion of power had come, not with vengeance, not with retaliation, but through presence. The subsequent days at Northern Command blurred into a haze of meetings, debriefings, and the relentless hum of secure lines to D.C. General Eleanor Vance, however, remained largely out of sight. She threw herself into her duties with a renewed, almost surgical focus. No one mentioned the incident at Sunbeam Gas during operational briefings, yet its shadow lingered in every room. There was a shift in how junior officers looked at her, a mix of awe and something else, something quieter, a recognition. The whispers followed her through corridors and into the mess hall, but she paid them no mind. Her silence, once a deliberate strategy, now felt like a fortified bunker, guarding something within her that had changed forever. One evening, Colonel Thorne found her in the command center. The room was mostly empty, just a few technicians monitoring the ever-glowing screens. "General Vance," Thorne began, his voice unusually soft. "The inquiry into Miller and Jones is underway. Internal Affairs is taking it seriously. The video, it went viral." Ellie didn't look at him. Her eyes remained fixed on a tactical map, watching distant troop movements unfold in glowing lines. "I expected as much." "There's pressure, ma'am, from advocacy groups, from D.C. They want more than suspensions. They want a statement." She finally turned, meeting his gaze. "A statement, Colonel? What kind of statement? That I am surprised by bigotry? That I am shocked by injustice?" Her tone was even, but laced with a deeper fatigue. "I've served this country for over 30 years. I've seen war zones and White House hallways. I've learned that some battles are fought with bullets, and some with smiles and veiled contempt." She paused. "This isn't new, Marcus. It's just recorded this time." Thorne absorbed her words in silence. "Still, General," he said gently, "the impact is real. This has reached the top. There's talk of a public appearance, a press conference." Ellie walked to the window, staring out at the base lights smearing into the desert darkness. "A press conference," she said quietly. "To what end? To reassure the public that even generals can be humiliated in broad daylight? To remind them that rank doesn't erase skin color in the eyes of prejudice?" She exhaled, slow, deliberate. "They want a show, Colonel. They want to frame the narrative. But I've never been anyone's prop." "It could be an opportunity," Thorne said carefully, "to speak for others, to use your voice, to name what so many endure." She closed her eyes just for a moment. The image came unbidden. The gas station's peeling walls, Miller's smirk, the cold snap of handcuffs. Her silence that day had been deliberate, a statement louder than any speech. But now the silence felt heavier. It carried a weight placed on her not just by what happened, but by those watching, waiting. "Give me a day, Marcus. Just one day." Thorne understood. "Of course, General. Whatever you need." He turned to go, then hesitated. "Ma'am, it was an honor watching how you handled that. That was leadership." Ellie gave him a faint nod in return. The next day, Ellie didn't write a speech. She didn't rehearse lines. She sat alone in her quarters for hours, staring at an old, worn photograph of her mother. Her mother, who had taught her the value of stillness, of standing tall even when the world tried to push you down, who had shown her that silence wasn't surrender, it was steel, honed quiet. She thought of every face she'd seen over her career, the soldiers she had led, the civilians she had protected, and the countless others, unseen, unheard, who had endured their own humiliations, without a title, without a camera. Her personal pain had become a public mirror, and mirrors, once cracked, cannot pretend they were ever whole. Her decision came not from anger, but from something deeper, a call to duty that went beyond rank, beyond protocol. It was not about vindication, it was about visibility. It was about those who hadn't been heard, about those still waiting. Her service, she realized, wasn't ending. It was simply shifting to a different kind of battlefield. The press room at Northern Command had never been used for anything like this. Rows of chairs filled quickly with reporters, military correspondents, and government aides flown in overnight. Cameras were positioned at every angle, their red lights blinking like watchful eyes. The seal of the United States Army stood at the podium, polished and pristine. Behind it, silence waiting to be broken. When General Eleanor Vance finally entered, she did so alone. No entourage, no flanking officials. Just her, standing straight, hands at her sides, her uniform immaculate. The murmurs in the room died instantly. She walked to the podium, placed a folded page before her, and looked out at the crowd. But she didn't read. "I wasn't going to speak today," she began, her voice even and steady. "Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I wasn't sure it would matter." A pause. No flashbulbs. No sound. Just the weight of listening. What happened to me at that gas station in Nevada wasn't new. It wasn't unique. It wasn't even surprising. It was simply captured. She looked directly into the camera now. I've served this country for 33 years. I have commanded troops in high-risk zones. I have represented our nation in peacekeeping missions. I have advised secretaries of defense. She paused. The weight of her words settled. But last week, none of these achievements protected me. Because I was alone, and because I was black. A ripple moved through the crowd. Some reporters lowered their pens, realizing the gravity of what had just been said. They did not see an officer. They did not see a citizen. They saw a threat. And this did not happen in silence. It happened on camera. It happened in daylight. It happened despite my credentials, despite my voice, despite my history. Her hands rested calmly on the podium, but her gaze cut deep. This isn't a speech asking for an apology. I'm alive, I'm whole, and I know what a privilege that is. She looked toward the back of the audience, toward the students, the young women watching her intently. What happened to me reveals something larger, something that did not begin with me, and unfortunately will not end with me. She took a breath, measured, deliberate. This is not about a general in handcuffs. It is about every American who has been invisible until it was too late. For a moment, no one moved. Then the first applause came, tentative, unsure, but it grew quickly, becoming thunderous, not just for her, but for what had been named, for what had needed to be said for so long. Eleanor stepped down from the stage without a wave, without theatrics. She walked straight, shoulders square, pace steady, toward the barracks. She didn't look back. The effect was immediate and impossible to contain. Clips of her speech spread across every platform. News anchors replayed each word. Think pieces flooded in. Schools and churches held viewings. Protesters held signs quoting her. For many, she had said what they themselves had never been allowed to voice. The incident was no longer just a moment. It had become a movement. Doris Miller never reopened Sunbeam Gas. The "closed for health reasons" sign remained in the window for weeks before the place was quietly sold. Some said she moved out of state. Others whispered she just couldn't face the town again. Her silence, in the end, became just as telling as Eleanor's had been. As for Sergeant Miller and Deputy Jones, their fates were sealed. Internal Affairs, under mounting pressure, concluded the investigation swiftly. Both were dishonorably discharged, their badges stripped, their careers obliterated. In response, the state governor launched a wide-ranging racial sensitivity reform across all law enforcement agencies. No more optics, no more delay. The country had seen too much. And Eleanor? She declined interviews. She turned down congressional invitations. She avoided spotlights. She returned to her post, the drill yards, the corridors, the quiet of discipline and duty. At night, she stood by the window of her quarters, looking out over the darkened fields bathed in floodlight. Outside, the world spun on. But inside her, something had shifted, not because of what was done to her, but because of what it revealed, because of what she now carried. Her service wasn't ending. It had simply changed shape. And in that stillness, that iron silence, she prepared for a new kind of war, one where truth, finally spoken aloud, might echo loud enough to be heard.